that you're here. We are just getting some things set up, and I got multiple screens going here. So forgive me if I'm looking over here because there's a couple of screens over there. I'm gonna, when we get into the webinar today, I'm gonna turn this camera off so you're not too distracted by me looking around at different screens, and we will have some fun this morning and talking about estimates. So we'll give a few more people, some folks, some time to get in here. And then Allison is also on the line. She's going to be kind of monitoring things. So as we get through this, if you have questions, we're going to try and leave some time at the end, but also drop some notes in the chat as we get into this. And Allison is going to be helping monitor things on the back end there. So got a few people lined up. Ben's here, Dan's here, Jim, Tim, and Tom. I think we had about 80 people register for this thing. So we'll give some folks a few more minutes to come in here. And like I said, I'll do my best to answer questions as they come up, but with a couple of different screens going on, it's going to be, we'll leave the questions till the end. Okay. So with that, Allison, if you want to make sure that we are recording, we will jump in. I'm going to turn the camera off. Thanks for everybody for showing up early. And coming in here, and we are going to have some fun. I promise. I'm going to try to make estimating fun this afternoon for you. So with that said, let me turn the video off. Everybody can see the title screen there. Let's turn that off. I'm going to adjust a couple of things, and we will get into this. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this Pro Hour, and I am thrilled to be here today, and I'm looking forward to seeing everyone on November 11th for the NARI Milwaukee Remodeler and Supplier Expo, and I hope that you're planning on attending. It's going to be November 11th at Pewaukee, Wisconsin. I think I said that right. Allison actually had to send me an email and spell out Pewaukee phonetically, so I'm here in Knoxville, Tennessee, and we were just joking around that the more vowels in a word, us Southerners kind of get lazy with that. So Pewaukee, Wisconsin, the Remodeler and Supply Expo, and it's going to be an event dedicated to connecting and educating everyone in the remodeling industry. The attendees, you're going to hear from nationally recognized speakers like myself, and you're going to be able to visit the trade show and see the industry's latest products and innovations and earn continuing education credits, and you'll be able to network and so much more. So please mark your calendars for November 11th, Pewaukee, Wisconsin. And this event's going to have something for everybody in the remodeling industry, from business owners and designers, project managers, lead carpenters, marketers, everybody in the field. And if you register, you're going to get $50 off if you register before October 16th. So don't pay more than you have to. And you can visit Remodeler Supplier Expo, all one word, remodelersuppplierexpo.com. And you can register and get that 50% off. All right. So as we jump into this today, like I said before, feel free to drop a note in the chat as we get going if something comes up, and we will hit some questions here at the end. But today, let's get into the training and let's get this party started. So the title of this training is Fast, Accurate Estimates: How to Get Them and Why Your Brain Gets Them Wrong. So if you're like most contractors, and I'm guessing that you have a love-hate relationship with estimates. You can't get work without crunching the numbers and sending out your estimates and proposals. So in that sense, you love having them because it means you got money coming in and there's going to be some sales. But then they start to pile up on you, and you get behind and you don't get to spend the time that you want to on them. You don't have all of the info that you wish that you had, but you got to get them off your plate because the salesperson in you loves them and you keep committing to more. So this sense of constant urgency makes you hate them. And then you start a project and you realize you forgot something, or the assumptions you made 6 months ago are no longer valid. So you start cursing yourself, and that little voice inside your head says, never again. I'm never going to miss this again, or I need to remember to add that thing next time. But you forget to add that thing to your estimating system, or you just get so busy that the mistakes repeat themselves. Well, I'm here to let you off the hook. The reason your estimates are always wrong is not your fault. It's actually your brain's fault. And that's what we're going to learn here today. I'm going to show you how your brain works when it's estimating, and why it's almost always wrong, and how you can correct it. So let me just tell you what's going on in your brain every time you estimate a project. It's this thing right here your brain is doing. This thing actually has a name. It's called the planning fallacy. And it's been proven by neuroscientists and behavioral economists, and it affects every human being. Here's
Hey,
what the
Shawn.
yeah.
Shawn, I'm sorry to interrupt. You are not screen sharing right now.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that. If everyone can just hold on for one moment while we fix the technical issue.
All right. Let's see. Now, is it sharing?
I'm not seeing it shared.
All right. Let me, because it says I am screen sharing on my side. So.
Okay, I'm getting, it is screen sharing. Yep, and I'm sorry. We're
Oh,
all
that's
good.
okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Whew. Great, great. All right, so we're all on the same page. Let's see. All right, so what's going on in your brain is this thing called the planning fallacy. Let's make sure that we're back online here. Okay, it's called the planning fallacy, and it's been proven by neuroscientists and economists, and it affects every human being. So here's what the planning fallacy is. It's the tendency to underestimate the time it will take to complete a project while knowing that similar projects have typically taken longer in the past. And this, the planning fallacy, is the reason your estimates are wrong and why your brain does what it does. So let's break this down even further. The planning fallacy displays what is known, and this is nerdy brain science stuff here, it's known as an optimism bias. An optimism bias is when we plan for or expect future benefits or a particular outcome that we want. You see, we underestimate the time a project will take while simultaneously knowing that the same project has taken longer in the past. That's an optimism bias. We plan for the outcome we want at the same time we ignore what we did last time. Every project or plan is subject to optimism biases of the planners, and this isn't just prevalent in the construction industry. It's any project or any plan in any industry that involves the human brain and human thinking. But let's take a look at what this does look like for you and your construction business, okay? So here's how this works. You've got this project. That's your project right there. Forgive my lack of graphic, abilities, and then this is you. Like I said, it gets even worse. Okay, so you look at this project and you think, oh, I know how to do this. This is very familiar. I got this. But the problem is you're not actually looking at this project. Your brain is looking at this project. And it's recognizing this project as something very familiar. So your brain acts very fast. It starts calculating, estimating, and processing the information that's right in front of you. And here's where the problem lies. You're only using part of your brain, the fast part of your brain, the same part of the brain that helps you determine that if, that noise in the middle of the night in the backyard is the neighbor's cat that you want to fight, or whether that noise in the backyard is the boogie monster that you're going to have to run from because you don't want to die. You see, this fast part of the brain has kept us alive for centuries, and that's a good thing. But there's another part of the brain that's very useful. This part of the brain, though, is much slower. It takes longer to process thoughts, and it also does and performs complex thinking. So while the fast part of the brain looks at this project, that familiar thing, and says, oh, yeah, I got this, the slow part of the brain is saying, no, you don't. Slow down there, hot stuff. And because the fast part of the brain is so fast and it helps keep us alive, the slow part of the brain and the thoughts and the planning that come from it, from the slow part of the brain, start to fade into the background, and it's often ignored. But if we would listen to the slow part of the brain, then we would remember the last 50 projects that look just like this one that never turned out like we estimated. But we can't do that if we don't have a system for it because the fast part of the brain is so dominant. This is the optimism bias. Our brains see something very familiar and we react and we keep going. Meanwhile, the slow part of our brains are trying to remember historical data and we move forward, letting the fast brain drive the bus. And that's how we plan for the outcome that we want while ignoring what we did last time. This is the planning fallacy, the tendency to underestimate the time a project will take while knowing at the same time, we have this knowledge, knowing at the same time that the similar projects have taken longer in the past. But since we don't have all the time in the world to think and rethink every single estimate, you do need a system that is fast to produce using the fast part of the brain, but also a system that is accurate, that remembers historical data and can plan for the real world. So we need this new system to organize our data, standardize our process, and eliminate the guesswork so that you can produce fast, accurate estimates. This is the system that we teach all of our clients in the Built to Build Academy, our fast, accurate estimating system, and it works. So here's what just a few of our clients have said when they change their way of thinking and they change their estimating system. This is Mikael Lakes. He's actually a Swedish contractor. So if you think that the problems that you have in your construction business are just to you, trust me, it's worldwide. If you're in the construction business anywhere in the world, we all have the same problems. He said the biggest takeaway from this system is how easy it is to check yourself and the effect it has on profits. I wanted a system like this, but never knew how to do it. Jody Poole, JRP Construction, said, I love the systematic way this is set up. I use a spreadsheet with cross checks, but nothing as streamlined as this. I can't wait to start working on my database. We got Stan Beck, great process for the external perspective. We'll get into the details of what that means, the external perspective, here in just a minute. We've been hoping for the best and losing profit because of unforeseen stuff, but this system gives us the discipline to be more detailed. And Chris Mackin says, this system makes communicating the expectations to my team so simple, I almost feel silly for overlooking it. So this is the system, and this system will work for you too if you follow the 3 simple steps I'm going to lay out for you. So I just wanted to let you know that you're going to love this simple system if you're sick and tired of not having a system, or if you've been looking for a way to streamline your estimating system. So just drop a note in the chat. Who's looking for a better way to estimate? Just give me a, oh yeah, or heck yeah, or I think you can even do emojis. You can do some thumbs up. If you're looking for a faster and more accurate way to estimate, just drop a note in the chat. Give me a thumbs up. Everybody still tracking with me? Okay, good. Yep, we got Dan's in. He's saying yes. We got some others dropping in there. Okay, I guess I should probably introduce myself. My name is Shawn Van Dyke, and yes, I have always been a nerd from the beginning. In the late 90s, I got a couple of engineering degrees. Then I started my first business in 2005 in real estate development, and then I started a general contracting business. Along the way, I became an executive at a high-end trim and millwork company, and then in 2016, left my job as an executive of that company and started my coaching business. And then I started writing books and speaking at industry events, just like this. And now, me and my team operate the Built to Build Academy. And I get to work with and train construction business owners on how to create systems so you can make more money, streamline your business, and get your lives back. These are just a few of the awesome contractors that we've had the pleasure to work with over the years. So let me give you what the Built to Build Academy is in a nutshell. There are 3 levels. Built to Start, where we cover the foundational systems that every construction business needs to be profitable. The Built to Grow program, where we focus on creating operational systems so the business owners can remove themselves from the day-to-day, and the Built to Lead program, where we focus on building leaders within your organization. Now, I'm not going to get into the details of each of the programs, but the reason I'm showing you this is because what you're learning here today is directly out of the Built to Grow program and our estimating system. The reason I'm showing you this is because I'm not making this stuff up just for this pro hour. What you're learning today is taken directly out of the program that we run all of our clients through. So even if you're thinking that your estimating system is bomb-proof, or you think that incorporating these three simple steps into your estimating system is going to give you your time back and it's going to help you become more profitable. Okay. So just wanted to show I'm not making this up. You're getting the system that we teach all of our clients. So let's get back to the topic at hand. Creating a system for fast, accurate estimates that organize your data, standardize your process, and eliminate the guesswork. Okay. So let's show you where we're going to go today. First, we're going to discuss step 1. That's called the internal perspective. Next, we will cover step 2, the external perspective. And then finally, step 3, we need to make sure that everything checks out. So we do a sanity check. But one quick item of housekeeping before we dig into these. I want to tell you how to get the most out of this session today. So whenever I've presented this information, laid out this system, I've always had business owners or estimators that want to get into the nitty-gritty of their estimating program and how they do it and why the simplicity of what I'm showing is wrong or how it wouldn't work for them. And I totally get that. Everybody likes their own way and their own program. So just the one thing that I ask, and this is how you get the most out of this session, is I want you to focus on the process here, not the program. What I'm going to show you is a simple way to create your estimating system. And it doesn't have to be the software program you use. Your program may be more comprehensive or more complex. That's totally fine. But what I need you to focus on here is the process I'm showing you and not worry about which software program you could do this in. I'll just be using some basic spreadsheet stuff here as we get into the details. And you may have another program, it's totally fine. But behind that big comprehensive program that you love so much is really just a database of information. And if your database and your system, if they don't incorporate these 3 simple steps, then you're losing money. So let's agree to focus on the process. Is everybody cool with that? It's just a process here, and you can incorporate this to any program that you have. Okay, so here is our 3-step simple system. This is your brain, and there's part of your brain. This is the fast part. So we want the fast part to perform step 1, the internal perspective. Then we're going to get into the accurate part of the brain, the slower part of the brain, and we want to do that step. We want to do step 2, and we call this the external perspective. And then third and the final step is just a sanity check. So that's it. 1, 2, 3, internal, external, and sanity check. So first up, let's talk about the internal perspective, and let's have some fun with this one. Okay, so do me a favor, and I want you to pay close attention to the video I'm about to play for you. I've removed the sound so it doesn't mess with the internet and delays in playing here. But what you're going to see are some basketball players on the screen. I want you to count how many times the players wearing white pass the ball, okay? So just count the number of passes from the players wearing white.
Hey, Shawn, I think
Yes.
we lost audio.
No, I'm just being quiet so they could watch the video.
Okay.
I didn't want to distract anybody. Okay, so now how many did you get? Go ahead and drop it in the chat if you're keeping count there. How many did you count? Okay, some people say they never saw it. Oh, no video. There was no video. Didn't see it. Okay. That's going to defeat the purpose of this point. Did anybody see the video? All right. No video. Okay, so that would explain why. Are you seeing the screen now? Okay, so this will be interesting. So what I showed you was a video. The answer is 16, but nobody saw that. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to go to the invisiblegorilla.com. You're going to have to watch this video. And let me describe what happens. I'm going to kind of ruin the surprise for everybody, but I'm sorry that video didn't display. This is actually a very famous experiment where they asked people to watch that video, and they were just simple people on a basketball, having basketball, passing them around. What happens is they ask the people to focus on the players in white passing the ball. And what happens during that is that somebody dressed in a gorilla costume walks into the middle of the stage, beats his chest, and then walks off the stage. And like 75% of people never saw the gorilla because they were asked to focus on a very particular task. And so that's what's happening in the video. It obviously would have been more effective if you could see that, but you can search that on Google. You can probably go do that right now and see the invisible gorilla, but now you know to look out for the gorilla. Anyway, this was a very, very famous experiment that was done, and I'm going to skip this because it had a video on it as well. Anyway, what's going on here is something that the researchers determined, and they gave a name called inattentional blindness. And this experiment was made famous by Dr. Christopher Chabris and Daniel Simons. And you can, like I said, you can see more at the invisiblegorilla.com. They say that inattentional blindness is how people can focus so hard on something that they become blind to the unexpected, even when it's right in front of them or staring them in the face. So we think that we're getting all of the information, especially when we focus, but sometimes we can miss out what's right in front of our faces or what's on the plans or what should have been obvious. So let's make sure that we can build an estimating system that will solve these problems. See, we think we've got all the information because we're looking at the plans, we get very focused, but sometimes we miss the absolute obvious. Anybody ever done that you can't believe you forgot to count the doors or the windows, or you left the square footage out for the tile somewhere? We want our estimating system to make sure that we're covering this. This is where the internal perspective comes in, step 1. So what I want you to do is, in step 1, the internal perspective is to think about it like this. You go into a restaurant and you're given a menu. So you pick things off of the menu for the stuff that you want to eat. Now, depending on the restaurant or your choices for dinner tonight are going to be limited to what's on the menu. If you walk into a McDonald's and you want a steak, well, you're not going to see that on the menu. McDonald's doesn't do filet mignon. So you can't get that there. You're going to be disappointed if that's what you want. Well, you're going to be just even more disappointed, and it's going to take a whole lot more time if the folks at McDonald's try to even get you a steak. See, that's not what they specialize in. So the stuff they specialize in, they put on their menu. So think of your construction business like a restaurant. What do you specialize in? What would be on your menu? So when someone calls you for a project, what can they order? So that's first. We want to take a look at the internal perspective, and we want to develop your menu. And the menu for your construction company are just your standard phases of work for the services that you provide. Now, I'm talking about the phases of work that you perform for every type of project you do, the general conditions, the site work, the foundations, the framing, and so on. Your menu for your estimating system should be organized for the type of projects that you do. For additions, what are your standard menu items or phases of work for an addition? If you do kitchens or baths, whole house remodels, maybe even new homes, whatever your specialty is, what's the menu? What are the phases of work? What can people order from you? And see, that's the next step, the order. So your customer comes to you for a specific reason, and you have a menu. When they pick a project type off of your menu, then they place an order. And the order is just the scope of work line items required to perform that project. And remember, what we're talking about here in the internal perspective, this is fast. Now, I know that every project is different and no two projects are the same, but the way you get through this internal step or this internal perspective, the first step, this fast step is to standardize this part of the estimating process. So here's our menu. From the menu, you place an order, and that order is made up of some standard scope of work line items. Oh, you place an order for our whole house remodel. No problem. We need to do some planning and design. We'll produce some drawings. Then we mobilize to the site. We start demo. And after demo, we do framing and so on and so forth. Each order contains standard scope of work line items for the order that you placed off of that menu. Now, once you've placed your order, then we send the order to the kitchen, meaning, the estimator, the designers, the PM, the folks that are going to be doing the work, and they start the recipe. The recipe is simply a formula for the scope of work line items. These are the instructions for the next step. This is where you're going to be counting the square footage, the number of each thing, or, does that line item require a certain number of man hours? So the recipe tells you how to put the ingredients together. And the recipe is how you need to put the ingredients together, the formulas that inform how you need to do the takeoffs or the ingredients. And the ingredients, well, that's just pretty straightforward. That's the quantities and your unit rates. So what the internal perspective is this is your database of information. It starts with the menu, the phases of work for the thing that you want, and some projects require different menus or different phases of work. So when you can place an order from that menu, you know what scope of work line items go with that order. Those scope of work line items have to be counted and measured and put together in a certain way. That's the recipe. And then you're just left with gathering the ingredients or looking at the plans and the specs and doing the takeoffs. So this is where most construction business owners or estimators, this is where they stop. They look at all of this, and it is very fast. You may have a database already put together, and this is the internal perspective. It develops a price, and you send this out the door. So let's take a look at what this looks like. And this should be very fast, because this work, when you have it developed in this way, your menu, your order, your recipe, and your ingredients should be very fast. So again, the phases of work, that's just your menu. If you're a home builder, maybe these are your phases of work. We have general conditions, planning, site work, grading, framing, MEP, rough ends. I know I'm leaving a lot out. I'm just painting with a pretty broad brush here. But in general, your menu is also the sequence of work that you're going to do. For a remodeler, it may start with planning, design work, site protection, demolition, framing, MEP, rough end, and so on. And even this system works for trade contractors. Now you got to mobilize to the site, and depending on if you're a trade contractor, you're going to install this area first and then another area. You approach the projects in the same way, and this work becomes very familiar. Maybe you're installing a certain number of items. We always install items A first, then items B, and we can develop some phases of work even for specialty items. That is the internal perspective. Next, we go to the order. That's the scope of work. This is super generalized, but I just want to show you how you can put this together in your database. Remember, don't focus on the fact that this is a simple spreadsheet. Your program can be more complex than this, but we've got our order, we've got our menu, our phases of work, general conditions, and then the scope of work under that under that, our order, dumpster, project supervision, site security, safety, administration, and so on and so forth. Even, and for those of you that do a lot of self-performed work, I'm just taking this example here saying, okay, our menu for this phase of work, our trim phase, under the order, we have scope of work. We have different types of interior doors. We have door hardware. We've got cased opening, our basic trim package, right? Those are the scope of work line items that can be very standardized, right? So next we have the recipe. And this is where we're getting into the nitty gritty detail saying, okay, we got our menu and our order. Now we need the recipe. And remember, that's the formula for the line items. You need to ask yourself, how do we need to count the ingredients? And again, just taking on this example here of the trim phase, we count up each door, but we need to count up lineal feet of crown. That's the recipe for how we're going to put this part of the estimate together. That's the formula for the line items. And then the ingredients, well, that just comes down to counting up the numbers, applying your production rates, and maybe your cost or your labor rates. That right there is the internal perspective: menu, order, recipe, and ingredients. And this should be very fast, because when you're pulling from a database, this should be very familiar. But this is where most people stop, because this does produce a dollar figure at the end of that. But we have to ask ourselves, in the internal perspective, this is where if we had seen that video, it would have been pretty powerful. We say, hey, you know what? You got to remember the gorilla. You got to look for those things that you have ignored because you weren't even aware they were right in front of you. And again, there's another video here. We can skip right past that. So, and even when we think we know what the answer is, we miss out on the stuff that's right in front of us. That's why step number 2, the external perspective, is so important. We want to get through the internal perspective, and now we move on to the external perspective. We did the fast thinking. Now we need to do the slow thinking. And this is the next step in the process. The way that we teach to do this is by applying what we call production factors. So we've gone through step 1, the internal process. We've developed our menu, our order, our recipe, and our ingredients, and it's given us a price for that work. Now, and that happens very fast. Now we need to step back and we need to say, what do we need to add to this particular project? Now we start remembering historical data. What do we need to add to this project to account for actually what's going to happen in the real world? So our production factors, or the production factors that you use, they're simply a percentage that are added to the line items to account for reality, unknowns, and deviation from the standard order. Remember, we want people to come to us and we give them our menu. They place an order and we want to process that very quickly. But every project is a little bit different. So we need to ask ourselves, what does history tell us? This kitchen remodel, this whole house remodel, this new house, what's different in this particular situation than it was from the last 10 that we did? And again, if we'd seen the video, this would land really well. The other way to look at this is we got to ask ourselves, where's the gorilla? So for example, some production factors that you would apply to your estimating might be, if you're doing an addition, how tight is the site? Can you get the equipment around to the back of the house that you need? Was the last project a pretty open site for remodelers? You know, you're always dealing with people in their homes. Do you have, and I know that plenty of you have done this, drop a note in the chat if you've ever added a factor to your cost because of the homeowner, just their personality, their attitude, and their willingness to work for you. My guess is that a lot of you have, right? So that's using this external part of the brain, the slow part of the brain, saying, yep, it's just a kitchen remodel, but this client might seem to be a nightmare, so we need to add something to that. That's what we're going to do here in the external perspective. So we've built out our internal perspective with our menu, order, recipe, and ingredients. I won't get into the details, and don't be intimidated by, this is a big bulky spreadsheet here. You don't have to worry about the numbers. But what I want to show you is now we're going to apply step 2. We've done step 1 and we've come up with a subtotal. Really, that's where a lot of contractors will send out the number. But we need to say, okay, how do these particular line items differ from the last time we did this? So the example that I'm showing you here, I'm just picking on like the trim phase. And when I was running a trim and millwork company, this is where we developed this way of thinking. We said, okay, we've got 10 doors that we need to install in the house. And then we realized, well, wait a minute, the doors on the main level are 6'8", or the doors on the upper level are 6'8" doors, and they're hollow core, but on the main level, they're 8-foot doors and they're solid. So if we applied if we applied our standard door installation man hours to each of those doors, we're going to be losing money on the doors that are more difficult. So we started to add production factors, saying, we would come up with like 2.5 hours to install an interior door and case both sides, for example. But then we realized, well, wait a minute, that's if the carpenter is standing in front of that opening with the door in hand, that's the time it takes to install. But what does it take to get that door to that location? And what if on this project, the garage where all the doors are being stored is halfway across the site? What if it's downstairs in the basement? What if you got to carry doors up through the stairs and we can't ding up the walls? All of those things create these production factors. And so instead of like a lot of contractors do, they get down to the end of it and they add a fudge factor, or they just add some percentage and they kind of smear it across everything and they hope that it works out. If you develop this external perspective, it does take some time. And that's what we want, to think a little bit slower, but you can go through line item by line item and apply a production factor to individual line items so that your price doesn't blow up. And when we do our sanity check, which we'll show you here in a minute, I'll show you how this becomes very, very accurate. So the production factors are simply a percentage that you're going to add to each line item. You may, like in this example, we have a setup and breakdown factor of 10%. We added that across the board to everything. Then we would have a difficulty factor. And again, this is in a trim and millwork situation. We said, okay, if it's a solid door, then that creates a difficulty because they're heavier and they're a little bit longer to move around. But it doesn't have to be much, 5% in certain areas. Then we would also add a custom work factor for specialty items. And then we realized, like, hey, we got to make sure that all of our supplies or our warranties, or we'd have some other miscellaneous factors. So we developed some production factors. You can have as many of these as you want. I would say don't make it too complicated. Keep them pretty streamlined. And what you'll realize is that when you go through this external perspective again and again, this actually becomes very fast as well because you start to become familiar with it. But it's using a different part of the brain than when we used in the internal perspective. So the production factors, don't forget the gorilla. When you go look and watch that video, then all of these gorilla references will make sense. I promise. Okay, so that's step number 2, the external perspective. Now we want to move on to step number 3, the sanity check. And here's what I find that a lot of construction business owners miss out on. They have different ways to check and make sure that all of the things are included in their scope of work, and that price goes out, but they forget about the labor budget. So every time that you send out an estimate or a proposal to a client, that estimate produces 3 things. First of all, it produces a scope of work. Yep, we got that, no problem. That's the internal perspective. And it also produces a price for the work. But the third thing every estimate produces is a labor budget, meaning there's a certain chunk of man hours assigned to any line item that has labor involved. Now, I'm not talking about your subcontractor gives you a price, you mark it up, and that goes out the door, right? I'm talking about the stuff that we self-perform, all the way from maybe project management or on-site supervision down to the individual line item tasks that your team may be self-performing. So we want to make sure, especially, that we check and do a sanity check on the labor budget. So back to the external perspective, we walk through the internal perspective to produce what I call a subtotal. Then we walk through this external perspective, adding our production factors to the line items for the real world to account for the unknowns and deviations from our standard menu. And you see right over here at the end, that produces a new total. It produces a dollar figure. And again, this is in a big spreadsheet, you add all these up and that's your price. Now that we have all of this information and we have a dollar amount assigned to every line item, then we can reverse engineer the labor budget. So what that looks like is now we have not only our individual scope of work line items, but if you look here at the end, and I've hidden some cells to clean this up a little bit, it tells me exactly the number of hours, including that extra time that I added in for the production. It tells me exactly. An example for this, the install interior doors and case both sides for the single, that first line item, I have 28 man hours to produce that. This is the information, if you'll see at the top of the page, called the project handoff. I'm going to print out a page from my estimate that shows these hours, and this is what I give to my superintendent, my foreman, my lead guys, whoever, and say, you've got 28 28 man hours to install all of these doors. And there's 10 of them on this site. So if I put 2 guys on it, then you guys have got to get these doors installed in 14 man hours. And what you'll hear, this is why we call it the sanity check. Not only does it make sure that you've got the information and everything works out, but you'll also hear from your people, you're crazy. We can't do it in that amount of time. And they may be right. You need to hear that information because they are going to reveal to you what is stopping them, what's slowing them down. They're going to let you know about all of those gorillas that you aren't aware of. And so all you got to do is drop back in and you either adjust your recipe or your ingredients, or you might need to just bump up your production factors. And this becomes a way that becomes very fast and it becomes very accurate. So let's do a real quick recap here. Step number 1 for fast, accurate estimating, the internal perspective. That's going to be your estimating menu. From the menu, your customer places an order, that kicks off the recipe, and that's the ingredients. This forms your estimating database. Once you've got that, you're going to end up with a number, right? And we walk through this menu, order, recipe, ingredients. Then we're on to step number 2, the external perspective. We want to use the slow part of the brain and use our production factors and say, okay, what's going to stand in our way of producing this in our standard way? Reality, unknowns, and deviations. And you can actually calculate your unknowns, because if certain unknowns come up on every project and you track them, then you can start adding that in. Now, I'm not talking about change orders. I'm talking about when you look into a project and you're pricing it, you know whether or not you have all the information. If you don't have all of the information, then you're going to put in a factor for the unknowns, not for the change orders, but the inefficiencies and the time that you're going to have to slow down in order to calculate and stop the project, deal with the owners to figure out those unknowns and write those change orders. So just want to be really clear on that. You're not guessing at the unknowns, but if there are a lot of unknowns in your projects, then you can factor that in as well. And then obviously deviations from the standard way that you're pricing. For example, like interior doors, it's going to cost me more to install doors upstairs than it would on the main level if those doors are stored on the main level, just as an example, right? So the way that we do that, the external perspective, is just by applying these production factors. Again, gorilla reference, it'll make more sense when you see the video. And then finally, the last check is our sanity check. That's where we're going to reverse engineer our labor budget, and we're going to give our people the information. We're going to hand off this information and tell them, by the way, you have 28 man hours to install this item. I want you to track your time according to this, because if it takes you 29 man hours to install this task or this line item, we're losing money. Here's the information that you need, because this is the way we estimated it. This is what we sold. Every time you send out a project, you have a scope of work, you have a price for that work, and you have the labor budget. You need to make sure and do a sanity check and be willing for your people to tell you, hey boss, I'm sorry, that can't be done. You're crazy. That is actually something to be celebrated, because you can find the hurdles that are standing in their way, or they're going to make you known. They're going to make known the way that you need to be estimating projects. So those are the 3 steps: internal, external, and the sanity check. What we're fighting here is the optimism bias. We plan for the outcome that we want. We all do this, and we ignore what we did the last time. Remember our figure here. We see our project. It's very familiar. We say we got this, but it's actually our brain that's looking at this thing, and it's acting very fast, and it's off to the races. But our slow part of the brain is saying, hold on there, hot stuff. You don't have all this, but it fades into the background because it does work slower, and we're not remembering the last 50 projects that never turned out like this. This is the planning fallacy, the tendency to underestimate the time it will take to complete a project, while knowing that similar projects have typically taken longer in the past. We want to build a system to fight the planning fallacy, one that organizes your data, streamlines your process, and eliminates the guesswork. We've got this called the fast, accurate estimating system. That's what we teach in the Built to Build Academy. And just to show you, this is what is in our Built to Grow program. And we'll wrap all this up right now. Just wanted to say, hey, join us on November 11th, and we're going to talk about our scheduling system and the customer experience system. All of these things come out of the Built to Grow program. But if you're interested in learning more about me and what my team does in the Built to Build Academy, then please go to builttobuildacademy.com/apply. You can apply for one of our coaching programs. We'll end up on the phone call and see if the academy is the right fit for you. In the meantime, Love for you to join me on November 11th. I'm going to see, I think I can say this right again, Pewaukee, Wisconsin, Remodeler and Supplier Expo in $50 off your registration if you register before October 16th, just about a week away. Visit remodelersuppplierexpo.com, and Allison is posting that in the chat there, so you can do that. So with that, we ran through that. Let me check a couple of things here. I can turn my camera back on. Hey everybody, sorry about the technical difficulties there with the video. Anybody have any questions? Or did any questions pop through in the chat that I missed while I was rambling on there? Did anybody go and watch and go to invisiblegorilla.com? You can look that, it's all over YouTube. You should be able to find it, and it's a pretty fascinating thing. And since you already know the answer, what you should do is test it out on somebody that hasn't seen it, like a spouse or somebody else you're working with. Show them today, and I promise most people, 3 out of 4 people, are not going to see the gorilla. It's pretty amazing. Okay, anybody have any other questions? Yeah, Jim said he's seen it in the past. Right. It's very famous experience, so people are very aware of it. But Jim, I will say one thing. Go watch that video again, and because they added to it, and there's something else that changes in there, and see if I won't spoil the surprise for you, but there's something else that's going on. And they even say, even when we know the answer to something, we know that the gorilla is going to appear. My guess is you didn't see the other thing that happened. So I'll just leave that little cliffhanger there for you. All right, cool. If there are no more questions, like I said, hope to see everybody. I'm looking forward to getting back on the road again, seeing everybody on November 11th at the event. Yes, this is going to be available to review. Allison's got the recording, and I'll let her deal with how she's going to get that out to everybody. Yep, said we'll share the recording afterwards. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. Like I said, go to builttobuildacademy.com/apply if you'd be interested in learning more about our programs, and I look forward to seeing everybody next month in Pewaukee. I think I said that all right. All right. With that, I'm going to shut this down on this side. I think, Allison, if that's cool with you. And
absolutely. Thank you, Shawn. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you. And we're turning it off, and we'll see you guys next month.